Hello, everyone. This is the first episode and ever on the MMA Hippo channel, and today I'll be breaking down the UFC 316 main card, starting off with the matchup Vicente Luque versus Kevin Holland at welterweight. Now, obviously, Vicente Luque has been on a loss streak, and he's fallen out of the top 10, top 12. I don't believe he's even ranked anymore. And Kevin Holland is just, he's Kevin Holland, so he's that journeyman guy who's always been there as a decent, somewhat good striker who's dangerous on the feet, has no ground game whatsoever, even though Joe Rogan just lies his fucking ass off every single time and acts like Kevin Holland has some crazy jiu-jitsu when he's barely done anything with it in the UFC. Now, Kevin Holland's last win was over. As I was saying, Kevin Holland's last win is over Gunnar Nelson by decision. It wasn't a very impressive performance. It wasn't even a good performance at all. He just managed to do more damage in the entire fight. He dropped Gunnar Nelson, I believe, once or twice. I mean, Gunnar Nelson hasn't been a serious contender in years. Lost to RDR by submission before that, and then Roman Dolidze. Now, the RDR loss, he's an upcoming prospect, so that's one thing, but the Roman Dolidze loss, that's just, come on, how horrible is that? That was just unexcusable from Kevin Holland. I don't, he's getting 32. He's never, he hasn't looked good in years, to be honest. He was, he had that big winning streak, obviously, in 2020. Everyone says he's a mythical fighter. Everything then came down to welterweight. Has been indecisive of what weight class he's at. Always has looked better at. Not always, because he did look good at middleweight. However, you can put that to a number of circumstances because all these names that you see, Buckley he turned his career around by going down to welterweight. So that's one win. Fluffy, that's a pretty good win. Darren Stewart, come on. Charlie Ontiveros, come on. That's not good. And obviously Jacare Souza was washed. And then losing to a Derek Brunson is one of the worst fighters. Was one of the worst fighters in the UFC. I'm so glad he's not anymore. Then lost to Vittori. And so ever since he came to welterweight, lost to MVP. He beat Michael Olajaychuk. I believe the Dolidze fight was. Oh wait, no, it was the RDR fight that was at middleweight. So he got submitted, and then came back down for the Gunnar Nelson fight, or it was at middleweight, but still not a very impressive performance. And he hasn't ever. He's one of those guys that rarely ever shows up to fight. It's very rare for him to come in and just look completely focused, completely determined, no matter what Kevin Holland you get. It's just, he's not that guy. He's a journeyman, just a gatekeeper for prospects into the top 15 just to have a somewhat decent name over their belt. But now the matchup with Vicente Luque, obviously, it seems like they're just kind of trying to give Kevin Holland a name to stay relevant because Vicente Luque is terribly, terribly washed. Beating, even though you can look at his record and say, oh, it's not that bad, only, 2-3 in his last 5. You look at the performances in all of these, I'm not, holding a fucking victory over Temba Garimbo high at all. This guy, never done anything good in the UFC. Just has never been good. So I'm not gonna think that's a good victory at all. The Buckley loss was that was one of the worst performances I've ever seen. He just curled up in a ball, quit. Buckley didn't even look good. Buckley is another overrated contender in my opinion, but I'll go over that a different video. And so that was just a horrible performance. RDA has not looked good in years. He's pretty washed. Really was, his best at 55. and hasn't looked good since, or hasn't looked the best since. Got knocked out pretty bad to Joff Neal. Uh, that's when he had the brain bleed, I believe, and had to be out for a year. And then lost to Bilal before that, so he was kind of, after the Bilal loss, that really took wind out of his sails and, demotivated him, kind of took that hunger away from him that he had. So that was just not, that was kind of the start of his downfall, in my opinion. And he's on his way out. I think he, was up and coming a while ago, looked pretty good with his striking, but hasn't done anything with his striking that I was impressed with in the last 5 fights of his. So I'm not really going to look too far into this fight. I feel Kevin Holland, obviously being the taller guy, got to keep at range, should use his teep kicks, even though I know he's not gonna. He's gonna be a fucking idiot. He's probably just gonna rely on what Kevin Holland is. He's gonna rely on that right hand that he drops people with. So he's gonna set up the 1-2. Probably get pieced up a little bit by Vicente Luque, and I feel it'll just come down to Kevin Holland's small moments over Vicente Luque's big moments. I think Kevin Holland does have a good chance at knocking him out. And I think that's, I don't really think Vicente has a great, will to be in there anymore. I feel like if he does get clipped, he might be on his way out, or might try to find a way out. So Vicente Luque's tools for victory is keeping his guard high, trying to rely on wrestling, make it boring because Kevin Holland fucking sucks on the ground. Using his body kicks, his jabs, keeping his guard up though. He has to keep his guard up. Just basic combinations. Kevin Holland likes to keep his chin very high in the air, so that could be a great weapon for Vicente to target. I think Vicente should use his leg kicks, and Kevin Holland against some of these strikers stands really high up. I don't think he's gonna be expecting that many takedowns, so I think Luque should be able to get Holland down and keep him there. Maybe not for the entire round. I feel like Kevin Holland will be able to get back up because Luque is not a good grappler either, but I think Luque will do enough to get him on the ground and keep him there for whatever, a minute at, minute to a minute 30 seconds. Just, quarter of a round to have him there. And then just, don't overexpose yourself if you're Luque. Just play it safe. Maybe look for a submission victory and just keep going to the ground. Make it a boring fight if you're Vicente Luque. Now, if you're Kevin Holland, I could make up a game plan for him, but what's the point? He's not gonna follow it, even if he had it. Even if he had it laid on his fucking desk and had it memorized in his brain to do it. It's Kevin Holland. It's like fucking asking Michael Chandler for a game plan. He's not gonna do it. He's just not gonna listen. He's gonna get in there, get clipped, and then just be like, all right, you want to fight? And then Kevin Holland, instead of actually fighting like Chandler, Kevin Holland's just going to stay in there, not do anything, and then throw one right hand, and it will probably fucking land. So, Kevin Holland, if, probably just going to rely on that big shot, like always, trying to get a highlight finish. I think he has a good chance to clip Luque pretty, I'd say early-ish in the fight. I'd say second round. If I was to predict this fight, I'd go Kevin Holland by second round TKO. I just don't think Luque has a will in him anymore. Neither is Kevin Holland. I just don't think either of these guys are serious about or fully committed to the sport of fighting anymore at all. So I'm going to go Kevin Holland either by, I'll say split decision or second round TKO. I'd lean second round TKO, though, if I were picking a fight, picking the outcome. So I have Kevin Holland winning that matchup. Now on to the second fight of the card. Actually, one of the most highly anticipated fights of the card. Mario Bautista versus Patchy Mix now. Mario Bautista coming off the win over Jose Aldo, highly controversial. Everyone fucking hates him for it. Just a boring fighter, just doesn't really do anything entertaining, gets beat up a lot. And Patchy Mix obviously making his UFC debut from Bellator. Last win was over Magomedov. So with Patchy Mix making his debut, I kind of look at his record. I haven't seen the most of Patchy Mix, but I've watched a few of his fights. Obviously, he's been on a 7-fight win streak after a UD loss. But his big wins: Raftien-Stott, Sergio Pettis, and Magomedov, all great wins. Raftien-Stott's win is a very good win from him, and he's only 31, coming into his prime. Not really a KO guy, more just subs or decisions, so I won't look into him doing too much damage to Mario Bautista, knocking him out. The only way he would be able to is if he stuffed a lot of his takedowns. But I think Patchy is actually going to rely on a good amount of grappling in this fight. So that should be interesting. And then Mario Bautista, very controversial decision to Jose Aldo, I had Jose Aldo winning that, actually. I thought he did enough damage. Mario Bautista was getting pieced the fuck up, he stayed in there, got hurt, a good amount of times. Didn't really ever look that good in that fight. In my opinion, just kind of just held him up against the cage. Ricky Simon, not a good win. All these wins by decision, submission, and then, submission. Just not really anything that stands out to you if you're looking at this guy as a serious prospect. Both guys 31. Both guys actually switch stance. Obviously, Mario is the less polished striker. Patchy Mix actually does have very good. It's very basic stand up, but when he does a very good job of not risking too much when he does stand up. He does a very good job of limiting opportunities for his opponent. So, and just switching it up, versus Mario, who just uses his striking to, just fucking get a takedown or not a takedown, put him up against the fucking fence and just hold him there. So the keys for Mario in this fight would be Mario Bautista, make it grueling, do kind of a Colby Covington approach, throw some strikes, 1-2. You got to get Patchy backing up to the cage, win the footwork battle, get him backed up to the cage, taking him down, holding him up against the cage, clinch strikes and everything. I wouldn't rely too much on his striking. I feel like that'd be playing a dangerous game, even though Patchy doesn't, have that many knockouts on his resume. I feel he's definitely the more dangerous striker, and if anyone were to get a finish in this fight, I would definitely think it'd be Patchy by TKO. So I think Mario should, limit what he's doing on the feet. Just try to get to the takedown. And maybe Patchy hasn't been conditioned that well. Maybe lights will get too bright for him, but I don't see it happening. It's going to be a tough fight for both guys, to be honest. I feel like this fight is really going to, project the career of both of these guys. Whether Mario's going to be a serious contender or Patchy is going to be one. And whoever loses this fight I don't really see him making their way back to the top. Or, just in a contender fight for a while. So, yeah. Now on to Patchy's keys to victory. I'd say Patchy, he's got to do what Patchy does, that unique footwork, relying. He's got to get Mario backing up. If he can get Mario backing up, using his teep kicks, he has good, somewhat decent, boxing mixed up with his kicks. He's very, like I said, he limits what's put out there and doesn't really risk too much. So I think he should be pretty safe with everything he does. If he can get Mario backing up, he can do some damage. I do believe he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Mario Bautista. I'm just a little worried that he might get, like, after, stuffing a few, throwing him off, that Mario might just wear him down and just keep him on the fence there, which I'm a little worried about. But I don't see that happening. I think Patchy's gonna piece him up a little bit. I don't think I feel Patchy's gonna come into this fight and strike with him. I feel like he's just gonna come in and try to stand and get Mario out of there. Uh, or yeah, I feel he's gonna try to look for a dominant win here. I feel like this, if he does want to be a serious contender, a dominant win here, like a knockout, would look very good for him and catapult him into a higher ranked fight. Someone, maybe Song Yadong after this, uh, someone up there. Uh, I feel like that'll be a good fight for him. But I think Patchy mixes keys to victory. Like I said, that teep kick, leg kicks, simple boxing. 1-2, keeping that jab in his face, backing Mario up, not letting him get too close or closing the gap or letting him push you back. Using his knees and uppercuts. That's a big thing, like we saw in that knockout of Rafting Stats. Or Rafting Stats. Big, beautiful knockout. That was gorgeous. Uh, those knees that that knee that he obviously shut his lights out with, I'd look for those, just show them to Mario, like threaten the takedown. A lot of these guys don't, like, I want to just keep it in his face. Maybe just a lot, you just feint it at him a lot, like the Volk uppercut in the Makhachev fight. Keep that in his face, even though Patchy doesn't really have much to be worried about in the grappling. I'd just be worried about getting held up against the cage. I don't see either guy really submitting the other unless Patchy dropped him and then went for a submission. But if he drops him, I just think he's going to go for the KO. I think if I was predicting this fight, I'd say Patchy 29-28, 30-27. I'd say 30-27, two cards, 29-28 on one. Or I'd look for I'd say either a early second round stoppage or a late first round stoppage. I'd look for those I'd say actually early second round, so like minute or two into the second round, TKO. I'd look for that if I were, looking for a finish. I don't really think it's the most likely to happen here, but I think Patchy is going to come into this fight looking for a, big win. A UD over this guy's not going to look that great, so I feel like he should come in looking for the win by stoppage, and if he does, I think, using those teep kicks, that boxing, I feel like he does have the ability to get Mario Bautista out of there in the second round. Probably a minute or two in, I'd say just overwhelming him, teep kicks to the body, maybe hurts Mario to the body with some knees in the clinch. I feel like that'd be a great weapon for Patchy to use, those knees to the body in the clinch. That's a very good weapon that he should really try to target in those teep kicks. But I'd say Patchy mix by unanimous decision. That's my official pick. If you were looking for a finish in this fight at all, I'd go Patchy by second round TKO, specifically to the body, but primarily Patchy by UD. Alright, moving on to the third fight of the main card, Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer. So I think this is actually a very interesting fight, and probably going to be a pretty entertaining one. Now, obviously, you got the fridge, fat fuck, one of the most unreliable guys in the sport, so who knows if this fight will even happen. Kelvin Gastelum at middleweight, which I don't know why he moved up to middleweight, and he's fat again. I mean, this guy's, it's a horrible spot this fucking UFC is currently in with all these unreliable guys. Two of them on this card. I mean, Kevin Holland's a reliable guy to fight and everything, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about reliable guys that will win. These guys, Kelvin Gastelum, just who knows if he's gonna show up, who knows if he's gonna fight. So, and Kevin Holland, just an idiot, just really arrogant. So I don't know, but more about this fight, anyways. Kelvin Gastelum coming off a UD to D-Rod. I don't give a fuck. And then losing to Sean Brady by submission. Uh, you know, so Sean Brady actually pretty good fighter, so that loss isn't that bad. And it was in the third round too. And then beating Chris Curtis by decision. I believe that was pretty controversial if I remember correctly, and I believe Kelvin got hurt in that fight. And then, so he has 3 fights in the last, 4 years. So, not a very good look. And then a 2-year break. I can't remember if he got suspended or what happened, but I don't know. And then 2 losses to Jared Cannonier and Rob. So if I were to look at his track record and everything, he was obviously on the upbringing to when he, beat Bisping by knockout pretty brutally, and then, Souza, and then he fought Izzy, pretty good fight, and then just sold the bag when he had Izzy hurt in the 5th round, and his career is just, gone very downhill ever since. He looked like a promising prospect when he was first coming up. He had pretty solid boxing, a thick frame, built like a fridge. But now he's just a chubby fat fuck who sucks at fighting. So I wouldn't really, rely on him to do too much in this fight. He's 33, 5'9" at 185. That's never, I'm not, that's not a good size. That's not a good size for a welterweight. Maybe if he lost weight, he should have just stayed at welterweight. I thought he looked better than he had at, middleweight in a while. So, but now he's back fighting at middleweight again for some reason because he can't stop eating, that fat fuck. Now moving over to Joe Pyfer, you got, was an upcoming prospect and pretty hyped up actually for a while off of the Contender Series. Had some pretty good wins, all by knockout, and then he, got a submission, sub victory, whatever. A lot of these subs over all these bums, I don't really take those into consideration because, none of these guys are, that good in the lower ranks. Anything can happen when you have that, threat or ability. So, and you're decent, somewhat decent. So, and then he lost to Jack Hermanson by decision. I believe that was that at Elevation? I believe it was. And Pyfer didn't really look good. He just gassed out in that fight. And then he comes back, flatlines Marc-Andre Barrios, just puts him out cold, face plant. That was hilarious, by the way, the way he went out cold. But, that was a good victory. I mean, Marc-Andre Barrios, just kind of, gatekeeper. Now, you want to look at an elite win. Gerald Mishar, GM3. One of the greatest fighters of all time. That's a great win right there. That's a fucking great win. I don't know how he pulled that out of his bag. But, and KOing him in the first round, you'd think this guy's the next fucking GSP doing that. Never been done before. And over a guy with the striking of GM3, that's just crazy. But in all seriousness, Joe Pyfer 6'2", he's 28, so he's, I think, I don't really consider that loss to be too bad. When a lot of these guys gas out like that, it's more of a learning mistake in my opinion, especially when he's still this young. I wouldn't really hold that too hard against him, especially with the rebound victory. After that, I feel like he kind of, got, just matured a little bit, knew what he had to fix, and then hopefully he did fix it. I mean, this is still a 3-round fight, so I don't think he's going to gas. But, yeah, I think he's still a decent up-and-coming prospect with the power he has, that can put a lot of people's lights out. So, now going to Kelvin Gastelum's keys of victory. His keys to victory are just, to be honest, he's got to get in close, stay with that pocket boxing a little bit. Cause, I mean, you can't really stay at range. He doesn't have, range at all. He's got somewhat decent boxing. Never been a good fucking, never really had the best ground game at all, so I don't really think that's gonna be into consideration. Just try not to risk it. Keep your hands up. That's a big thing. Try to overwhelm Joe Pyfer. Get him backing up. You can control. And I was talking to someone I know about this, and he was saying one of the biggest factors is that if you have someone backing up, you control their breathing. You control the tempo of the fight. If Kelvin Gastelum can do that to a guy like Joe Pyfer, who has already had cardio problems, I'd be looking at a probably, I'd say, split decision victory over him, or 29-28 Kelvin Gastelum. If he can stay in there, be durable, just kind of, he's got to stay with it and just stay motivated in there. He's got to, stick to the basics, pocket boxing and everything. Just overwhelm him, getting back, back him up. So that's a big key for me. Now moving to, I wouldn't really focus on, maybe a few leg kicks, body kicks. He's got to be risky doing that up against a bigger guy, though. So I won't really use that too much, but maybe just to throw that out there. And I'd shoot on him just to show him something, even though it's probably not going to work. Now going on to Joe Pyfer's keys to victory. He's just got to go in there. I really think he has the power to put Gastelum out bad. I think he's just got to stick to that. At first, just range boxing, keep the jab in Kelvin's face. I won't really let him back me up, but it wouldn't be the worst thing if he, wasn't advancing as much. He should still advance a lot. But, I keep that jab in his face and then just, shots to the body, teep kicks, head kick. I'd look for a head kick, some knees. And then just look out for the knockout shot. No, when he does, just, I'd probably look for a stiff jab to, get Kelvin backing up, and then just, if I was Joe Pyfer, stick to my tools. And one thing that Joe Pyfer does well is he can overwhelm you if he has you backing up. So you should try to do that. If he can get Kelvin backing up, just try to overwhelm him. I think that shot will land if he does overwhelm him. And now for my pick of the fight, I am actually going to go with Joe Pyfer by... I'm going to go first round flatline knockout. I think he's really going to put Kelvin away, and I think he's going to do it bad. Probably with... I think after stunning Kelvin and maybe dropping him, I think he's going to catch him with an uppercut or a cross. I really think that Kelvin has just not looked good. And this, you look at a lot of the track records for guys like, Tony Ferguson or like, these, okay, well, not that to say that Kelvin was ever on that level, but like, the guys who just came up and were somewhat good. And then you look at the track record when they go down. I'd say the track record right now is lining up for him to get knocked out in this fight. I won't bet on him, having a fucking resurgence in any division at all. I think Kelvin's time is done. He's 33, 5'9", built like a fridge. He just doesn't, he's never had the mindset for fighting, to be honest. He has decent fundamentals and decent boxing when he was, up and coming and had some momentum, but he just doesn't take it serious, can't get his diet in check, which is like one of the most telling factors about a fighter. If they don't care enough about the food they're eating to stay as a top guy, what does that tell you about, their motivation to fight and stay in there? It just tells me that Kelvin's in there for a check. So I think Joe Pyfer, who's still, up and coming, I think you can tell the way he fights. He's fighting to, put you out and put you away bad. The way he swings, he has mean intentions on a good amount of his shots. So I'd look for first round stoppage and a pretty bad stoppage. I think Pyfer's going to put him out pretty cold in this fight. And then I think that'll be the end of Kelvin Gastelum. Maybe not. How much worse can it get? I'd say like, 2 more losses after this one. He gets cut from the UFC. Just he's already, out of any rankings, so he's never, he's not. It's not like he's gonna have a resurgence or fight any contenders. I don't see him doing much in this fight at all. Just I see him getting steamrolled and crumbling under the pressure in this fight because clock's winding down for him. Joe Pyfer, 5 years younger, taller, more powerful, just with a good amount of momentum right now that he regained. So that's a big thing for him. And yeah, I'd say my official prediction is Joe Pyfer by first round brutal flatline KO. Now moving on. What the fuck? Now moving on to the co-main event. You have Juliana Pena versus Kayla Harrison. So this is actually a very interesting matchup. Some people actually think this is the most anticipated fight on the whole card because it's not a very impressive card. The whole summer doesn't really have the most stacked pay-per-view cards. They more spread it out over fight nights, which is interesting and I haven't seen in a while for the sport. But so you got the champ. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm calling her the fucking champ. Juliana Pena. Got her belt back over Raquel Pennington, last fight. Real fucking, barn burner. Real fucking great fight. So these were really fun to watch. And then just an embarrassing fucking performance in the fight before that against Amanda Nunes. The fact she is a professional MMA fighter, not even just a professional, the fucking champion of the women's bantamweight division in the UFC, and she's coming forward. Look, you even see it in this picture. She has her fucking eyes closed in every single exchange. She runs forward. She throws punches like she's on a fucking elliptical, just like, those machine bikes that you see at the gym. She looks like she's throwing punches like she's on one of those. She's fucking, like the rope you have at the gym to work your forearms? It's like she's fucking doing that. She's just fucking, she doesn't know how to throw a punch, and she closes her eyes like she's like, get away, stop hitting me. She closes her fucking eyes. It's just, honestly, okay, it's a very bad look for the sport, without sounding, too negative. But, so, obviously beat Pennington and, got the belt back. I'm not expecting, she's 35, coming over the cliff. Kayla Harrison, ton of momentum. Only has 2 victories in the UFC. I thought she had 3 or 4, but beat Holly Holm by submission pretty fast, actually. And then, the Caitlin Vieira victory was a little worrying because her striking wasn't the best. I believe she got a little stunned in that fight. But, it's not gonna come down to the striking, I don't believe, because neither of these fighters are gonna be able to finish each other with knockouts. I don't think either of them are gonna knock each other out. It's gonna be a good time for you to run to the store, I believe, or just play a game of basketball or talk to your relatives or some shit. Good 25-minute break in the middle of the card. That'll be fun. So I probably won't last that long, to be honest. But going to Juliana Pena's keys to victory. Now, keys to victory, obviously you gotta stop the takedowns. It's a big thing going up against someone who's, I don't want to say she looks like, she's built like a man, but there's some similarities in their builds. Kayla Harrison isn't the most feminine woman of all time. I'll say that. So Juliana Pena has got to stuff the takedowns. She's got to. If I'm her, it looked like Kayla Harrison had some problems with her cardio in the last fight. So that's going to be interesting in this fight. If she's fixed that, which, it's hard to do in just the span of one fight in that time. But I don't think that's that. I mean, if I was Pena, I'd try to take that into consideration. If I'm Pena, I'm using my teep kicks. You know, again, rifling those knees up the middle, especially in the clinch. You know, in the clinch when your back's up against the cage, I'm not knees to the body, but whenever you have safe punches to throw that you won't get exposed for, uppercuts to the body, crosses to the body, I'm poking that jab to the body, teep kicks, body kicks to the body, leg kicks too, trying to stay at range. She can do those. She always has those, bum rushes like Derek Brunson, where she just closes her eyes. Well, Derek Brunson never closes his eyes, but bum rush is when she runs in with her eyes closed and throws a ton of punches. Now, who knows if they're gonna land? Now, I mean, a few punches are actually gonna land because Kayla's not. She's relatively new to the sport. So I think she'll be able to, you know, uh, I think she'll get hit. Kayla will get hit. Her striking is not very impressive. So, yeah, key just stick to technical boxing, whatever that means for Pena. Some kickboxing, you just stick to the Muay Thai. Knees, teep kicks, leg kicks. Maybe a few bum rushes just to get Kayla off of you. If you're getting backed up, you be like Trickus, make it awkward. If I'm Pena, which she does actually do good, she makes it awkward. So, and I think if she does all that and she can gas Kayla out, I think she'll get a unanimous decision victory, probably 48-47. But that's if she does all that and if, she's really determined. Now, to Kayla Harrison's keys to victory, with a frame like that in the women's, shit's not fair. She's going to outmuscle Pena by a lot, drag her to the ground, keep her there. She's going to land some heavy shots on the ground. Maybe just try to look for an early submission. If I'm Kayla, I don't rush it. I focus on backing her up, you know, landing some basic boxing. Look to counter when Pena rushes you like that. Or look for when she rushes because her eyes are closed. She's not going to throw a knee in the middle of that. Look for a takedown, just like a spear. And that, or a trip. Her hips are wide open when she bum rushes in like that. Uh, I'd look for Kayla to, if I was Kayla, I'd really try to slow this fight down. I wouldn't really look for anything too early with with her questionable gas tank, in my opinion. I'd look to try to just, keep it really just, slow it down. Keep her on the ground, keep her controlled, land some good shots, discourage Pena, and then in the second, third round, I'd look for the submission. Yeah. So, and then my pick for this, my official pick would be Kayla Harrison. I'd go by second round submission. I think that's pretty solid pick. I mean, it's women's MMA to be honest, so anything can happen. It's not the most refined division in the sport right now. But so I won't really take this pick into all like I won't take this pick as concrete. It's just my opinion. I'm not the most sure about this one, but I would say Kayla Harrison by second round submission. I'm definitely leaning towards Kayla Harrison as the odds are. Kayla Harrison minus 750 favorite. So I mean, look at the arm size on her. That's crazy. Bigger arms than fucking Sean O'Malley, like twice as big. Look at this shit. I like you see that arm compared to that arm. Look, it looks like fucking she should have his arms. I don't know how that works, but yeah, I'd go Kayla Harrison second round submission. I think she will look decently dominant in this fight. And yeah, I feel she should be able to get it done. Now moving on to the main event of UFC 316. You have the defending champ, Merab Dvalishvili, versus the former champ, Sean O'Malley. This fight, is very interesting to me, and gonna, say a lot about their careers after this, both of these guys. It's gonna be very, very, very telling for the career path they're gonna take. Now, like I was saying, yeah, this fight, very interesting. Obviously, the rematch, the first fight, somewhat boring. Merab, taunted and, obviously kissed and embarrassed Sean O'Malley and humbled him in the first fight. But to me, that was just such a weird and off performance for Sean O'Malley. So I don't know. I'll get into that into a minute. Merab, obviously great victory over Umar Nurmagomedov. Solid game plan. I was, watching those first two rounds. I'm sure everyone was wondering what Merab was doing. He didn't shoot once, and then obviously his plan was to gas him out. Beautiful game plan in that fight, and he looked good on the feet too. Merab, when he got stunned a little bit. He gets stunned in most of his fights, but what most people notice is that when he gets stunned, he fucking becomes like twice the fighter. Like, he gets better when he gets stunned. He's like, all right, now I'm gonna fucking fight. Cejudo cracked him with the left hook that, stunned and gave him, those chicken legs. Then Cejudo got fucking manhandled the rest of that fight. Petr Yan, I predicted that fight, just got manhandled that whole fight. Ragdolled. This resume is very impressive. Like, I consider these last, 6 victories to be a very, very high level run. You got Marlon Moraes, decent name, or big name, Aldo, legend, Petr Yan, former champ, Cejudo, pretty good champ, O'Malley, former champ, and then Umar, undefeated, Nurmagomedov, Dagestani guy. The stars were aligned for him to become champ. He's, obviously his cousin, I believe it's his cousin, Habib, and then, Islam, obviously, in that family. So it was just written in the stars for him to become champ, and the fact that Merab dominantly beat Umar was very, very impressive and very, like, a very defining victory for his career. And, coming off that fight, you might think that O'Malley has no chance, which that's what the odds portray. And, it will be interesting. It will be an interesting fight to see if, maybe they're right. But then going over to Sean O'Malley's resume, obviously, the last 4 fights beat Petr Yan. When I saw that live, thought it was a robbery. I think that's a pretty clear victory for O'Malley now. Going back on it, you got the Aljo knockout. Pretty good victory. Aljo had a stupid fucking game plan. Cheeto's a punching bag, so, well, whatever. And then Merab beat him. So, this fight is, in my opinion, it's make or break for Sean. If he loses here, it's gonna really, 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 really impact his career. I don't know where he goes from here. He's too big to go down to 25, but he's way too small for 45 unless he can pack on a lot of muscle. But I don't think that'd be good for him at all. I just think he's too small for 45, too big for 25. So I don't know. But maybe you'll just have to hope for Merab retires if he loses this. Now, the keys to victory for Merab, everyone knows what the keys of victory for him would be, pressure, Sean, do what you did in the first fight. Repeat it. Get those, overwhelm Sean with the striking, back him up, rely on that wrestling. What Merab does, what a lot of people don't realize, he will let you get back up to your feet just to dump you down again, and that tires you out so much more and discourages you so much more, because all that effort, all that motivation you got from getting up just drains right out of your body, and it's gone. So he does a great job, which I've rarely ever seen anyone else do that in the UFC. Beautiful game plan for his last couple fights. So he has a good team around him. Obviously, Aljo in his corner, Matt Serra. So, good coaches, good game plans. I'm a little worried about his game plan for this fight. I feel like the Umar fight, I feel like that's going to put too much wind in his sails. And, I think there's a chance that it leads to Merab's demise in this fight. and I'll get to that later. His keys to victory, again, overwhelming Sean with the boxing, uh, backing Sean up just like he did in the first fight, throwing a few punches, just the Colby Covington way, 1-2 takedown, 1-2 takedown, big punches on, keep Sean up against the cage. Don't let him get, a second to breathe. Don't let him circle off. Keep chasing after him. You control the octagon. You control that space. You control the void, as DJ says. So that's the keys for Merab Dvalishvili, in my opinion. Gas tank like no one I've ever seen, so that's not going to be a problem. Well, actually, I'll get to that in a minute. Then Sean O'Malley, his keys of victory. Keys to victory. So what I didn't see in the first fight from Merab, which, like I was saying earlier, just a weird, horrible performance. I was wondering where the fuck is his feinting at. He didn't feint at all in that fight. Didn't use many of his teep kicks. Wasn't relying on combinations, which is a weird performance. Now he says he was injured. And, every fighter says that after a bad performance. I actually do believe him. I think in this fight, rely on those feints so heavily. Use your feints to back Merab up. When you feint, he takes a step back, you take that step forward. You take that step forward. Don't let Merab back you up. You gotta circle out if he does. Use your knees and teep kicks. This is the biggest weapon for Sean O'Malley he needs to use. That teep kick is going to be there all night, and we saw in the 5th round against Merab that hurt him bad. If Sean O'Malley uses his teep kicks and, those knees, shots to the body, don't look to box Merab to the head, because he does a good job keeping his hands up high, but his body is wide open. Now, I know, Sean, obviously the taller guy, going to be weird for him to reach down like that and box Merab's body, but he needs to do that. I'd rely on those body kicks, ending those combinations with the body kick. So I'm going, feint, 1-2, lead body kick, feint, 1-2, body kick, 1 teep kick, using those teep kicks repeatedly. We saw Jack Della Maddalena, his performance, not letting Bilal back him up. Bilal, Merab, kind of decent fighters, with the pressure and takedown, not that much threat in the hands. So if Sean O'Malley can take what Jack did and not allow himself to get backed up instead of, not allow himself to get bullied, he has to be the bully in this fight. And if he can feint, his biggest weapon and his greatest weapon of all is the feinting, which he did not use in the first fight, which I was very shocked to see that he didn't. So I think that's a great weapon. Keep the jab in Merab's face. Keep those teep kicks. The biggest weapon he has to use are his teep and body kicks. Then knees to the body. Don't look to go to the head early. Do not. Look to go to the head later in the fight if it lasts that long. I'm going to the body very, very early. Going to the, few chopping low kicks early. Teep kick, teep kick, teep kick, feint. That, jab. If I'm O'Malley, really what I'm relying on early in the fight is just my jab, my feints, and my teep kicks and body kicks. And, not allowing yourself to be backed up. He's got to really, really focus on, not being backed up, which, feinting is a, key weapon to get Merab off of you, get fighters off of you is feinting. So, which he does better than anyone in the sport. So if he can do that, just don't allow Merab to bully you. In the first fight, he got bullied. So that's one thing that he should really try to change in this fight. Now, my official pick for the main event of 316. I know this may sound crazy, but I'm actually going... not that crazy, but still, I'm going Sean O'Malley by I'm going to say split decision. Or I'd say 3rd round TKO. I'd lean split decision. But 3rd round TKO is right there too. So if you take either, I'm not going to be upset. So, yeah, this is the biggest... I think it's the biggest underdog I pick because, he's plus 260. I'm gonna go Sean O'Malley by TKO 3rd round, or I'm gonna go by split decision. I think Merab, while he looked great in his last fight, I'm a little worried. I feel that with the win over Sean O'Malley, we saw how confident he was going into the Umar fight. I'm worried that that's going to put too much wind in his sails and he's going to be overconfident in his stand up. I think I do actually think he's going to look to strike with Sean and take Sean out in this fight. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I feel like the guy Merab is, I think he's going to look to stand with Merab or stand with Sean in the first early rounds. I don't think he's going to shoot more than twice, more than really at all in the first round. Maybe at the end just to secure it, and then maybe only once in the second round. After that, I think he will start shooting, kind of like how he did in the Umar fight, which I think that could lead to his demise in this fight, actually. I think if he does do that, that's going to lead to the end of him. He's going to have too much wind in his sails. He's going to be overconfident, kind of like Aljo was. We saw Aljo get, overconfident, did not have the best game plan, which Aljo, known for his game plans, had a great game plan against, Piotr Jan in the second fight, Cejudo in the fight after that, I believe. Or was it It was Dillashaw after that. Or, in the Cejudo fight, Aljo did. He got overconfident. And I think that with the mistakes that Aljo made in that fight, I think Merab there's a good chance Merab gets overconfident and tries to strike with Sean. And I think he'll get clipped. Or I think he'll just lose. I think it'll be a bad performance, to be honest. I think Sean, won't be able to stop all of the takedowns, but he'll land more damage, and he has a good chance of getting Merab out of there if he can do this. So I believe Sean by split decision, and they'll run back the trilogy, and if they do run back the trilogy, if Sean wins this fight, Sean's going to knock him out in the first round in the trilogy. Because Merab's getting old. He doesn't have much time left. That is the track record. Like this, that's the way these kinds of storylines go. Or he'll beat him more dominantly. But if he does beat him more dominantly, he'll get him out of there. So, yeah, no, I think Sean's going to find a way. I think that was a bad performance. I think he's going to find a way to get the belt back. I think it will be split decision or third round TKO. But, like I said, he's got to use those teep kicks. And yeah, those are my picks for the UFC 316 card. Thank you for tuning in if you are listening to the first episode on the MMA Hippo channel. Hopefully you come back for more. I'll recap the whole card when it's done. And thank you. Hopefully you guys tune in another time. Talk to you guys later.